Hi, this is Chad Spradlin with Lincoln Electric Cutting Systems. Today we're going to be going over some of the basics of Torchmate CAD along with doing our first nameplate project. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Our expectations are generating our first 10-inch by 3-inch nameplate that we can go ahead and fold and use for either a desktop, a worktop, or anywhere else that you want people to see where your name is at. Also, it helps if you want to forget your own. So let's go ahead and get started. So we have Torchmate CAD open. So let's talk about the basics of Torchmate CAD. On the very top of all of the software itself is where it tells you what is going on with the CAD itself or any of the objects that you have selected. So in the upper corners we have what the coordinates and where the coordinates are located throughout this whole entire workspace. We also have the size of where our objects are, so when we have something selected, the size of those objects. We can also scale those objects based on a percentage. The lock here is going to lock the proportions, either unlocked or locked. So if you want to make a 6-inch by 6-inch, a 4-inch by 6-inch, you would unlock the lock and enter in that size. If this object is locked, then it will proportionately scale that to the size that you have put in. We can also rotate based on angle, the rotation here. We can use these arrow keys right here and it will do it in 90-degree increments. So if you just need to rotate something 90 degrees, you can just select it and then use these arrow keys. This color square right here is representation of what the color of the object is. Usually we like the color to be black just because it's an easy distinguish between what is material and what is going to drop out. Or you can use any of these colors down here at the bottom of the screen. The tools over on the left-hand side, these are the major players. We have the orange pointer tool, which is just a select tool. That brings us this cursor. The scissors we don't use. The measure tool, we can use this to just do left click to left click. We'll measure in between. We can also do general and generic dimensions based off of our drawing itself. So if you need to generate some blueprints or something out of Torchmate CAD, you can do so with these tools here. The A is our text tool. This is what generates text inside of Torchmate CAD. The first one is just our normal text compose. We've got a frame that you can generate. So if you left click and drag out a rectangle, it will condense the text to stay inside of that rectangle. We have an on-screen kerning, so if you want to adjust the space in between letters while you're typing, you can do that, or you can do it throughout the text compose. We have a text auto layout, and then we have the basic spell check. The next tool down is all of the magnification tools. So if you are using a touchpad and not using a mouse, you can go ahead and use all of the magnification tools to go along with it. The next tool down is going to be our weld tool. This is what is going to be welding our parts together. We'll be going over this a little bit later. We have our shape tool. This is going to generate all of the shapes that we are going to be creating. As you can see, we have a circle, ellipse, a rectangle, polygon, star, an arrow, and a fan. Then we have our graphic design tools. We have our normal node edit tool, which just goes straight lines. We have a free edit tool, which is good for if you have like a stylus or you're using a tablet. And then the next one is going to be the arc edit tool, which creates arcs while you're doing also straight lines. The vectorization tool, that's a handy dandy little tool that you can bring in JPEGs, TIFFs, GIFs, and vectorize them for manipulation. We also have a straight line or a center line tool that goes in between those, so if you want to just generate straight lines based on what you're vectorizing. We also have the pen and stroke tool, which allows you to fatten up lines or to thin lines up, so if you wanted to generate wireframes or do wind spinners or something like that, that's a really good handy tool for that. The tool pathing tool is also available. I usually go through the menu items, which we'll be going through. If you want to do drill centers, though, drill centers are really handy. Instead of cutting out holes, if you want to just create a center point for a center hole instead of doing a plasma hole. And then the next tool down is the hatchet tool. This will split large designs into pieces, whatever you want. So if you have a 4x4 table and you're looking to do a 4x6 cut, you would use this tool to split your file in half, and then you can generate index points and go from there. The menu items at the top are the normal just menu items. The main ones that we are going to be using is going to be Arrange, Machine, and View. All of these items have a corresponding hotkey to go along with them. So if the menu item that you notice that you're using more than once, that will have a corresponding hotkey for it. So you can go ahead and use hotkeys if you're a hotkey person. So let's go ahead and get started with the nameplate. So the first thing we're going to do is generate a 10-inch wide by 3-inch tall rectangle. So I'm going to go to my rectangle tool. I'm going to left click on it. And as you can see, when you have an item selected, that the cursor changed to show you exactly what you are doing. So visually, you can look at the cursor and see that we have the square tool selected, or the rectangle tool, and it means that we can go ahead and draw out a rectangle. So I'm going to go ahead and left click, drag out, and then up at the top are the options for that rectangle. So I want this thing to be 10 inches wide, so I'm going to enter in 10, press enter on the keyboard, and then I'm going to press 3 for the height and press enter. As we can see, we do have a 10-inch by 3-inch tall rectangle. Now I'm going to press my orange pointer tool, and now we can look at the top and we can see exactly what's going on with this rectangle. We can see that it's 10 inches wide by 3 inches tall. We can see where it's at in the coordinates based on what it's telling us and based on this lower left-hand corner. So now, since I do know that this is 10 inches by 3 inches, I'm going to go ahead and generate some text that I want on the inside of this nameplate. So I'm going to just go to my text tool, select the very first one, text compose, and as we can see, we're going to generate some text. So the cursor has turned to a T, and all I need to do is just do a left click right above my nameplate. Now up at the top, it gives you all of the options that go along with the text. So if we want to change the slant degree, if we want to change any of the parameters for that text, it will show us up here at the top. My main focus is going to be coming over to our font detective. Our font detective goes through our whole entire computer and searches for all of the fonts that are loaded in it and loads it into Torchmate CAD so you can use it. So I'm going to go ahead and press this F up here at the top left-hand corner, and it will bring up the font detective. Now what the font detective is going to be showing us is what the font looks like with the selected font. If we have a particular letter that we're looking for, we can go ahead and enter in that letter up here in the upper right-hand corner, and it will display that here. We have groups of fonts. The Torchmate CAD will try to group fonts together to allow you to easily organize your fonts, but more or less, if you're looking for a certain type of font and you know that it's a sans serif, then it will only display the sans serif fonts. But for this practice, we're going to go ahead and make sure that we use all fonts. Down here at the font bar, I can just go ahead and press the combo box and then select the very first font and then use the arrow keys on the keyboard to cycle through the fonts that are loaded into the CAD. As we can see up at the top of the window, it's displaying what that font looks like. So I'm just going to go ahead here and scan through my fonts really quick or really slow and display the font, and then once I find the font that I like, I'll go ahead and press select and we'll get through typing. So I'm going to use this Abremia Bold. I'm going to go ahead and press select. Once I press select, the window is going to close, and then I can just go ahead and type what I want inside of my nameplate. Being that this is a nameplate and it's relatively generic, I'm going to go ahead and just put in nameplate. And I'm going to press the orange pointer tool. This will allow us to select our nameplate and move it around to where we want it. Now, being that we are going to be cutting this out in metal, we want to make sure that we expand this text to fit inside of the rectangle that we have displayed. So it's easier to do this without the fill option on, so I'm going to go to View and deselect Show Fill, or you can use Alt-S. So I'm going to go ahead and grab the center of my text so I can move this into where I want it. Now I'm going to use these grips to change and manipulate the size of it and make it so it fills up the plate, and we want to make sure that we have a little bit of space around because since we're cutting this out of metal, we don't want it to completely ruin our structure of our 10" by 3". So once I get it into place, I'm going to go up to Arrange and then Text to Graphics. What this will allow us to do is that right now our text is manipulatable, and if you don't like the text or you want to change the font, now would be the time to do it. Once we do the text to graphics, what it will do is it will change the text and turn it into a shape instead of being a alterable piece of text. So make sure that you have everything spelled right and the font that you like. Obviously we can change it a little bit later and do some manipulation to it, but at this point we're going to go text to graphics. I'm going to go to make sure that my text is selected, and I'm going to go to Arrange and then Make Path, and this will make it all one piece. Now I'm going to select all, and now I can press C then E, center and even, and that will make the text the center and even of my 10" by 3" rectangle. Now once that's done, I'm going to show you how Make Path works, and we'll make this into one piece. I'm going to go to View and go back to Show Fill. As you can see, or not, depending on how this is displaying, is that we do have the nameplate selected and we do have the rectangle. So I'm going to go to Arrange and Make Path with both of the items selected, and now we have a visual representation of what this design is going to look like if we were to cut it out on the table right now. Now if we're observing that, we notice that if the N, the A, all of these letters are going to drop out, we have the centers of the letters that are not connected to anything, which means that they will drop out into the table and you will have a weird looking nameplate. Well, we don't want that. So what we're going to do is that we're going to have to generate a bridge to attach these pieces to the rest of the nameplate to make sure that they don't drop out. So how we're going to do that first is we're going to generate another rectangle. I'm going to go to my rectangle tool. I'm going to go ahead and left click and drag out a rectangle. As we can see, we're able to manipulate this rectangle. I'm going to go up here to the top and I'm going to enter in 0.2 wide, and I'm going to make it 0.75 tall. Now the height really isn't as important as the width. The 0.2 is to make sure that there's enough structural integrity of the metal during the plasma process to make sure that it can hold on to these pieces right here without them being weakened or being able to fall out because of how wispy this is going to be. So 0.2 is usually going to be about the width that we would want to keep this, to make sure that if you are going to be doing any type of finishing on this nameplate, that it will be able to maintain the structural integrity to keep holding on to this. So once I have that 0.2 wide by 0.75, I'm going to press the orange pointer tool, and then I'm going to go to Edit, and I'm going to duplicate this thing a couple times because I need 3 of these because I have the center of the A, the center of the P, and the other A. So I want to make sure that all of my bridges are generated all at once. Now I can go ahead and select the bridges and kind of put them into place. And then I'm going to zoom into this one here, and I'm going to manipulate this to make it so it's not just a block holding on to a piece. So as we can see as we zoom into this location is that now I can go ahead and manipulate this to fit into my area. Now just like a normal bridge going over a gap is that we need a little bit of meat to go into this area and a little bit of meat to overlap into this area. Now once we have this item selected, I can go ahead and manipulate it to make sure that it kind of flows with the design itself. Now right here in the upper right hand corner between the top right and the middle grip is the rotation tool. So I can go ahead and just, when the fist goes over the arrows, it means that I can go ahead and rotate this piece. So if I left click, hold down, then I can go ahead and just move my mouse a little bit to rotate this. Now it's not altering the size of the bridge itself, but what it's doing is it's just rotating it but keeping the shape. So now that I have the rotation that I like, I can go ahead and manipulate this into the area to make sure that it flows a little bit more with the design. Now I can go over here to my P and do the exact same thing. Now it doesn't matter, once again, the length that's going into here, because that's all just going to be absorbed in when we do the weld itself. We can also use the arrow keys on the keyboard to move this thing to get the smaller increments to make sure that we have a nice smooth finish. I'll go back to my A. Go ahead and shrink this up a little bit. Manipulate it similar to the way that we did the other one. Now if you want to, you could actually just go ahead and duplicate the one that we had prior, but I like the practice. So now we have all of our bridges in place. Now if I was to go to View and then take off Show Fill, we can see that all of these objects are individual objects. So now I can go ahead and select my whole entire piece here, and we can go to our Weld tool, and we're going to use the very first weld selection. Now what this will do is that everything that is overlapping will merge into the design, and then everything that's overlapping just creates. So once I press Basic Weld, as we can see, those areas have dropped out, and now it has become part of the design. So I'm going to go back to View and put Show Fill back on, and this is exactly what we should be seeing. Obviously it would be different if your name is in there. But as you can tell, when we go and cut this with the plasma process, that there is going to be meat holding on to these so they won't be dropped out. You can also come back and manipulate these if you would like and make them flow a little bit better with your text. I'm a visual person, so I like to have all of my items really smooth and really neat and go along with the font itself. Now once we have all of our bridges intact, we want to make sure we're going to generate some legs to go on our nameplate, so when we take it to our folder, we can generate the counterbalance to make sure that everybody sees this front and center. So we're going to generate some legs. I'm going to go to my rectangle tool, and I'm going to go ahead and pull out one rectangle, and I'm going to make that rectangle 0.5 wide by 1.25 tall. Now once I have those parameters put into those dialogues, I'm going to use the Enter key to make sure that those parameters are entered into my item. I'm going to go back to my orange pointer tool, and now I'm going to press Control D twice. That is going to be for duplicate, because we need 3 legs. Now I'm going to go ahead and move those over to about where I want them for reference, and then we will go ahead and align those to what the nameplate is to make sure that they're nice and straight. So I'm going to go ahead and select this very first one on the left. I'm going to hold the Shift key down on the keyboard, and I'm going to select my nameplate. So the Shift allows us to add to a selection. So once I do the left first, hold down the Shift key, select the nameplate, I'm going to press L on the keyboard, and it's going to align to the left side of both the nameplate to the leg itself. Now I can go ahead and off click, select the center, hold down the Shift key, select the nameplate itself, and now I'm going to press C for center. Now as we can see, that moved that item to the center of the design. So now we're going to select the right hand one, hold down the Shift key, and you guessed it, we're going to use R for the keystroke to move that to the right side. Now once I off click, we can see that these 3 legs are not perfectly aligned, and we want to make sure that they are. So I'm going to go ahead and left click and drag a rectangle around these 3 items, and it doesn't matter if the selection goes into this design, it will not select it unless something is totally enveloped within that rubber selection. So once I have these three guys selected, I can go ahead and use this keystroke E for even. Now as we can see, all three of those are even. And now I'm going to use the arrow keys on the keyboard to just slowly move this thing up to make sure that it overlaps just a little bit of the design. Now we need to weld this in place. I'm going to go to View, Show Fill, and I'm going to go ahead and press Control A for Select All. And I'm going to come to my basic weld tool, and you'll see that these lines are going to disappear. That means that there's enough overlap to make sure that those can be all welded into place. And as we can see, those are now part of the whole entire design. Now we want to make sure that this bottom bar we are going to generate is going to be kind of like a helping counterweight. We don't want to fold each one of those, and if they get twisted or what have you, we want to make sure it's all done in one piece. So I'm going to go back to my rectangle tool, and we're going to go ahead and drag out a rectangle. We're going to make that rectangle 10 inches wide by ½ inch tall, and press enter. I'll press my orange pointer tool. Now because this is just one piece, we want to make sure that it's centered on our nameplate, but also aligned to the bottom of this bracket. So I'm going to press Control A for Select All, and I'll press C for Center and B for Bottom. And that aligned this bottom bar to the bottom of our nameplate. Now, since everything is still selected from the align, we can come over here to our basic weld tool and just weld that bad boy right into place. Now I'll go back to View and Show Fill. Boom. Pretty. So now we need to generate a tool path for this. So how we're going to do that is we're going to have our nameplate selected. We're going to go up to Machine. We're going to create a tool path, and then we're going to go to Male. The reason why we're going to select Male is for the reason is the outside perimeter is going to require a male tool path, but these inside features are going to require a female tool path. So when we select Male, it tells the inside portions need to be a female, with the outside perimeter going to have a male tool path. And we'll see that applied once we generate the tool path. So once we select Male, we're going to skip Template. We don't use templates in this CAD. So we're going to go to Basic Cut. Inside Basic Cut, here is our tool that we are going to be using, which is going to be Plasma. We want to make sure that we are climbing because of the direction of the plasma beam itself and how it rotates. We're going to be using the sharp toolpath cornering to make sure that there's structural or corner integrity for our corners. We are going to be entering 100 for a feed rate. Now the reason why we're entering 100 for the feed rate is that now when we take it out to the machine, we can scale that feed rate based on a percentage in the driver software. It makes it so you don't have to know what the feed rate is requirement for the material or the item that you're planning on cutting. So now let's go to the lead in, lead out tab. We're going to make sure that we do have a lead in generated. In the plasma process, unless you're doing thick material, you would probably use a lead out, but in this instance, we're not going to be using a lead out. I'm a personal fan of arc lead-ins, so I'm going to select arc lead-ins. And then because the majority of the time lead-ins go and generate out of corners, I want to make sure that my corners are nice and sharp, so I'm going to adjust my start point of that lead-in, and I'm going to go to the middle of the longest segment, which means that it will put the lead-ins into the centers of all of the longest segments generated. So once I have those items selected, I can go ahead and press OK. And as we can see, these items are generated, and we can see the lead-ins that are generated are in the centers and not in the corners. So we have female toolpaths for all of our inside features, and then we have a male toolpath on the outside perimeter. Now to export this job to our machine, we need to put this into the 0, 0 coordinate. So I'm going to go ahead and just grab my whole entire design, and move it down to the 0, 0 coordinate. Now, how I knew that it was the 0, 0 coordinate is that you can see those nice magenta lines there at the base of, or the left-hand corner of my material size. Also, I can verify that because in the upper left-hand corner, I have the lower left-hand corner selected, and my coordinates are set to 0 and 0. Now, once everything is selected and we're down at the 0, 0 coordinate, I'm going to go ahead and generate my G code that the machine is going to read to run our program. So I'm going to go to Machine and Output. Now in Output, we're able to view what our nameplate is right here. That's our tool path. I'm going to go ahead and do the Zoom tool so we can zoom into our design, get a little bit of a better look to it. And now I'm going to generate the G code by pressing the remote control. This starts the numerical control manager. This will generate the G code itself. So once that's selected, it generates this output control bar, but plus it also visually shows you what the G code is generated. Now I'm not going to bore you and put you to sleep by telling you what G code is, but as we can see in this very line number 6, that we have F100. That is the feed rate that we have put into our toolpath. So we know for a fact that there is a feed rate generated for our toolpath, and it is 100. The other thing that we can do while we're in this screen is we can come over to this output control and we can actually simulate what this design is going to do when it cuts. This saves a lot of time and frustration before taking it off to the machine. Obviously, it's going to be cheaper to run this in the software and simulate it than it is to find out that you made a mistake or a step was skipped on your design once you start to cut it out. It saves embarrassment when you're in front of people. Also, I would know. So all you need to do is press the play button a couple times, and as you can see, the pink line is telling you exactly what the design is going to do. So this design went from the 0, 0 coordinate here, jumped over to the A, and started cutting all of these interior features. And you could press the fast forward button and it will simulate the whole entire design. If you use the rewind, it will restart the whole entire design. I usually go through this a couple times just to make sure that I did not make a mistake, because it's expensive to make mistakes on the machine and it's super cheap inside of the CAD. So once I know that I've got my first 3 features going to be cutting, I can go ahead and press fast forward. As we can see, the very last cut is going to be here, and then it jumps to our outside perimeter and is going to be cutting the outside. Now I'm going to go ahead and save my G code. I'm going to come up here to Cut Now. This will bring up the browser for us to go ahead and save. So I'm going to go to my cut folder, and I'm going to go ahead and name this, you guessed it, nameplate. Now this is going to generate a GM type formatted file. So we want to make sure that that is the format that we are trying to save it to. Going through this cut now process, we'll be able to visually see exactly what type of file this is generating. The GM format is going to be for the Yakimove system running VMD. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. Once it gets done saving, I can still see my G code. So I don't want to look at that anymore. So I'm going to go ahead and close my output control, and it will bring us back to our design. Now I'm going to go to File, Save As. Now I'm going to go ahead and go to my design folder, wherever that's at. I'm going to go ahead and name this nameplate also. And I'm going to call it Design. Now when I find the file, I know that it's the design file and not the cut file. As we can see, it says Save As Type. We want to make sure that it's saved as the CDL format. This allows us to come back inside of Torchmate CAD to open this file up. So if we wanted to make changes to it or make any size changes, or we want to change out the name or anything that we want to do to that, then we want to make sure we come back to the CDL format type file, and we'll be able to make those alterations. You will not be able to make alterations to the GM format file, as that's just going to be a bunch of G code. And unless you know text editing and G code, then it's pretty much useless trying to come back into the CAD. So once I press save, that will complete our project. That was the nameplate project that we just completed. we're going to go into the next step, which is going to be generating a new project using clip art. With this clip art, we can bring it in and then manipulate it the way we want, and I'll take you through the steps on that.